Hi, everybody. My name is Tom Cushing. I will be one of your companions and sometimes leaders and guides through this first semester adventure of our blended curriculum. I want to start by saying I wish that I could be there, and I'm sorry that I can't. But I did want to add these greetings to those which you'll receive live and give you a couple of early thoughts that might be useful to you as you prepare for this magical mystery tour. Next slide. So, by way of agenda, I'll give you a brief personal introduction and then some thoughts about both GGU and funneling in on our HRM program, and then looking further at our class that we will be handling together as part of this blended sequence. HR as legal partner. A few thoughts about learning the law and a few themes of the course that you will undoubtedly get tired of my bringing back up as we proceed through this material. Next slide. So, in terms of ye olde professor, I am trained as a JD MBA, worked for the DuPont Company and Conoco Inc. for many years, but for the last 26 years have been a legal recruiter. So I am admitted to the practice of law in California, but my status is what's called inactive, meaning that I am not practicing law currently. Now, inactive does not mean inert, and I will try to maintain that greater level of activity throughout our semester. I have worked with GGU as an adjunct for some 24 years in a wide variety of curricula, including ethics, law, business and society, negotiating in business, and most prominently, employment law or keeping it legal. In my free time, as you can see, I'm an animal welfare advocate. That great dog has since gone on to the bridge, but I hope to see him there if I am very good in the remainder of my time here. I'm also a lover of mountains in August, which accounts for my absence and for which I apologize, sort of. Next slide. Now, with regard to GGU in general, and we'll funnel down into the course eventually, you have a lot of options in the Bay Area, and we're very pleased that you've chosen to throw in with us. Our program at GGU is intensely practical and applications oriented as opposed to being primarily theoretical. So we intend to be relentlessly pragmatic. We believe, I think, that theory alone doesn't give you the tools, training that you need to be able to use it vocationally, providing vocational meaning. And so we intend to focus all of our efforts in this course on the real world. We want you to be able to add value to your enterprise, whether it's by avoiding problems or heading them off or getting out in front of them from day one, and to have the edge on your colleagues or competitors in terms of analyzing new situations and keeping it legal. Our, as you may know, GGU has had numerous repeated national accolades for its approach to adult learning. That's gratifying, and it's also reinforcing in terms of our belief that we may well be on the right track to adding our own value into the Bay Area business community through you. Next slide. So, obviously you didn't go to law school, for which you are to be commended, and this may be your first exposure to a law course. The key here is to recognize that there is lots of volume and there's lots of reading involved in the law, and you do need to put it into a system that makes sense to you, and the more you do, the more sense it will make. On the other hand, it is not rocket science. Anybody, certainly anybody who can gain admission to this program, and most people in general, are able to understand and apply legal principles. So the first thing to recognize is don't be afraid of this stuff. We are working to coordinate our coverage and integrate the law into the real life of HR professionals such that it is more like life via a blending of these three courses than a separate discipline if it is handled uniquely. The program, as you know, is web enhanced. There is a certain amount of lecture. There is law that simply must be learned as opposed to experienced or applied or discussed, but we will have, I believe, a rich array of opportunities for discussions and exercises as well. We have cross-linked our courses with regard to Cyber Week activities in addition. Next slide. Now, there are some recurring themes in the course. As I say, you will likely get tired of my repeating them or pointing out their application. First, several have to do with the law in general. And the best thing I can tell you to start off with is that the law is messy. Law is more political philosophy than it is hard science. There is not the one right answer out there that one could grasp if one only had wit enough to do it, because it is very human, and where you come out on the law has a lot to do with where you come in to the analysis in terms especially of the political spectrum from left to right. We're all somewhere along that continuum on most issues, and we may be different places on different issues, but the law will be somewhere along that continuum as well. Legal or judicial, conservatism or liberality will be similar concepts. Now, the purpose of law is to provide both stability and evolution, that is, relevance that arises out of an evolution of legal principles to match the society. Generally, law follows social change in arrears after it has become evident that a new rule or piece of legislation would help solve social problems that already exist. Occasionally it leads, but that is not the rule. And as I say, the intent is to serve the current system, to provide predictability of outcomes and stability to the system so that there is less risk of living or especially doing business in the system of our society, and also that there is a relief valve mechanism that allows the law to remain relevant by evolving with the times. The times are very different than what they were 50 or 100 or 250 years ago around the founding of the Republic. And if the law stays static, the law loses its flexibility and its ability to respond to current situations and new challenges. So the system of precedent that we'll talk about in the law provides that stability because you follow a rule until there's a majority of an appeals court that decides that a different rule is better. And we will see there is this constant tug between principles of tradition or conservatism and evolution or liberality. I would also be remiss not to note that there is currently great turmoil in the law as between the Trump administration and the Obama administration that preceded it in particular, almost as if the fact that a rule was in place in one is a good enough reason by itself to change that rule. So we'll need to deal with those complexities and recognize that they are part and parcel of the law that we need to remain current in our study and application of. Next slide. Now, zeroing in on California law, first and foremost, is different. There are reasons for that. California is the biggest economy by a comfortable margin. It is also a relatively liberal state on that continuum between liberal to conservative, and it is known as a bellwether state. That is, things happen here first, not just surfing, and spread across the country to other points, especially points that are politically congruent with our state's approach. So there may be the general rule, and then there will be the California rule. The other thing that you can say that modifies difference is that California, as a liberal state, is unusually employee-centric. Now, if you look at more conservative locales, Texas as an example with another huge economy, you will find that its approaches are more tradition or conservative oriented. Most of you will be plying these arts in our fair state, and so it will be important to understand the general rules and the California variations on the theme. Just as a quick example, non-compete agreements, as we'll see in our first meeting, are unenforceable in California. They are agreements where an employee agrees not to work in a particular job for a competitive company within a certain geography for a certain period of time after leaving the current employment. Now, as you can imagine, that's a huge gotcha because the switching costs are high in those states. You have to agree to abide by these provisions or risk being sued. In California, those are simply unenforceable. They're not criminal. They just will be ignored by the courts. There are important implications of that. To my way of thinking, and others do agree with me in this one, Silicon Valley is not just here because of the weather, or Stanford, or Berkeley, or GGU. It is here because, in significant measure, of the free flow of talent or genius from one employment to another. You can walk out of one company on Friday and go to work for another on Monday, probably for a substantial raise. That will mean that the HR function is a greater challenge. It puts more pressure on you all because the costs of making that switch are so much less. We'll also understand that there are interactions between that doctrine and the protection of trade secrets, which are particularly important in this economy. So we'll see how all those things interact, but they interact that way because California is different and employee-centric. And finally, with regard to your chosen profession, human resources, the first thing to say is HR matters. We will see again and again how other companies have dealt with situations either well or poorly, and that they have gotten our attention because they either did it well or they did it badly, and you don't want to end up in our textbook for the most part. It means not only did you spend $250,000 to get a verdict on something from an appeals court, but you also probably lost and therefore are an important example of what not to do. So we will do our best to keep ourselves out of the future textbooks because HR matters and because you are the first line of approach on these situations. And apropos of that, prevention beats cure. It is almost always better to anticipate or head off a problem than to have to solve it after it has bloomed into a fully vetted dispute. So prevention almost always beats cure, and to the extent that your antenna tingle earlier as a result of exposure to this master's degree program, we will all have done our part to further the our contribution to the Bay Area economy through your efforts. So, with that, I will wrap up and simply say, next slide. I will see you soon. See you in September. I'm looking forward to it. I'll see you then. End of presentation.